It's no exaggeration to say that Tesla's autonomous software or full self-driving beta is exceptionally different from what's commonly on the market for autonomy. And this radical difference has actually made people believe that Tesla's in last place rather than first. Let's take a look. Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. First of all, this is the second part of a two-part series. I'll put the first part up here, and at the end of this video, you can watch them in either order. It doesn't really matter. The first part asks the question of whether Tesla released their full self-driving beta too wide, too fast. In other words, going to the full 364,000 people, was that too rapid of an expansion, and was it a tactical mistake? This episode focuses on why Tesla's solution to autonomy is so radically different and so far ahead of the competition that people actually believe they're last, and I'm not joking about that. So the primary motivation for this video comes from a CNBC video that just came out a couple of days ago, and it's got, last I'm checking, about 200,000 views, 186,000 views. So it's gotten a lot of views, a lot of people are watching this stuff, and a lot of people are believing what they're hearing, which is that there is no profitable case to be made for autonomy, and autonomy is not going to happen for a long, long time. And by that, I mean level 3, level 4 autonomy, where the car is basically driving itself. And of course, I will leave a link to the video in the description so you can look at it yourself. Normally, I would play chunks of the video for you so you could listen to what people are saying, but the entire video is backed by music tracks. It's so annoying, which means that I would get copyright strikes left and right for this video. So what I'm going to do is just play a little bit of the video on top of this as you're watching me talk, but mostly what I would suggest is to watch the original video if you want yourself. It's a 15.5-minute video, and you can watch it at double speed, so it'll take you like 7.5 or 8 minutes to watch the whole thing. So what I'll do instead, since I can't play clips of this very easily, is just give you my best interpretation, my best quotes of what's actually going on in the video, the salient points of that. And of course, like I said, watch the original video if you want the original stuff, but I'll do my best to represent what's actually going on in the video. So the first thing that's worth noting very, very definitely is in this 15.5-minute video, Tesla is mentioned twice. Once they're just mentioned in 2016, 2017, when they began rolling out their own software, when they separated ways with NVIDIA and Mobileye, and basically that's all they said. They just said they were doing that. And then the second mention is late in the video where they're considered to be last in the autonomy group. And I'll throw up an image here where you can see this is CNBC, but honestly, this looks like a graphic that I've seen before from other sources. So anyway, CNBC has their moniker on it. The interesting thing here is that you can see that Mobileye is extremely highlighted in this whole thing. So it makes me tend to wonder whether they didn't pay for this study or something, since they're placed in such large letterhead, while everybody else has lettering that's about the same. But anyway, you can see that Waymo, Mobileye, Baidu, Cruise, those are all grouped up together. And then way, way, way down at the back left is Tesla. And that indicates, of course, and as the person says that they're interviewing, that means that Tesla is in last place and they're kind of a joke. And that kind of a joke, by the way, is actually a quote from the video. And the person says they are not even close to being ready to drive without a human being behind the wheel, ready to take over at any time. Now, of course, there is a grain of truth to all of that stuff, but I'm going to get back to it in a minute. First of all, I want to talk about the rest of the video. The general gist of this video is to prove that autonomous driving is a fool's errand and a money pit. And that in the mid to late teens, everybody was dumping money into this stuff and lots of projects, but all of them have lost a ton of money. And some have started to go out of business. And so there's going to be very few players soon. And it's just a bad idea. This was it was a boondoggle that a lot of people spent a lot of money on, and it turned out to be worthless, and it lost a lot of money instead of gaining a lot of money. So a few salient points from the video to back this up. Number one, Jim Farley, CEO of Ford, said no one has defined a profitable business model at scale for autonomy, which means that nobody can make money on autonomy. And of course, in the late teens, when there was lots of cash on hand and lots of excitement and lots of fear of missing out, people put in a lot of money buying companies or partnering with companies that already existed to try to leapfrog ahead in this race. But as might be expected, when things get hard in that sort of a situation where you're talking about partnerships and many different cooks in the kitchen who each have their own agendas, when the money got difficult, that funding source dried up, and a lot of these companies have since shut down, been sold off, moved on to other things, greener pastures, etc. So some of the ventures that others have bought into, just as examples, there's Argo that Ford bought into, there's Cruise that GM bought into, and there's Waymo that Google originally owned. I think they bought somebody else, they owned it for a while, then they spun it off as Waymo as an independent company. But for all of these companies, the really critical part is that autonomy is not core to these purchasing companies, line of business. So as the video talks about, these companies like Legacy Auto and Google and Amazon and others want to do autonomy, but Legacy Auto in particular has to do electrification. They have to move ahead and electrify their vehicles. So if they have to make a choice, if you've only got a certain pile of cash, you're going to put the cash in electrification before you put it in autonomy. So when cash was available, when they had a lot of cash on hand, when they could do a lot of things, they would put money into autonomy. But when the chips were down, they were like, we got to move to electrification. And the only reason that companies like Waymo and Zoox are still in existence is because Google and Amazon are such behemoths that they don't really care if these projects actually make any headway. Again, this is what the video is talking about, not me personally. I tend to agree with that. I'm not exactly sure I agree 100%. But anyway, according to the video, these large behemoth companies can just do these vanity projects because they can do them. They don't really care if they make any money or not. But overall, the basic fact of this is, even including companies like Uber and Lyft, but certainly Waymo, Cruise, etc., is that all of these companies, their autonomous, vision, their mobility vision is losing money. It's a money pit. Both Lyft and Uber, which aren't even autonomous, ride sharing, they're just using humans to do that, lost a ton of money last year. And these other companies have also lost a ton of money doing this stuff. So these are just giant money pits. Again, this is according to the video, but also the facts of that are fairly true. And then we get to the interesting fact that earlier this year, both Waymo and Cruise said that they have achieved 1 million driverless miles each. So that's 2 million driverless miles within their little geofenced areas in San Francisco, Phoenix, I believe Austin, maybe Los Angeles, and maybe one other city. But anyway, they're in these little geofenced areas and they've driven altogether 1 million driverless miles each. And that, of course, is discounting the fact that there is a remote driver on hand at all times to take over these vehicles. I know that's true for Waymo. I'm not absolutely sure that's true for Cruise. But anyway, I believe that there are remote drivers who are able to take over the vehicle and pull it over safely and get it out of the way if something bad happens. And that's definitely seems to happen every once in a while with these vehicles, is that, there have been lots of instances. I'm thinking about the Cruise instance where a bunch of these vehicles sort of blocked traffic in San Francisco for a while. So, at that point, you've got to send people out to go and shuffle these things around and sort of reset them and everything. So while it is true that these cars have driven without a person in the driver's seat, they haven't driven, as far as I understand it, without a human being ready to take the wheel if something goes wrong. And then finally, an interesting little factoid, which is that Cruise says that they want to achieve $1 billion in revenue. That is not profit, that's just revenue. They want to achieve $1 billion in revenue by 2025, let's say the end of 2025. And in the video, they say that they would need about 6,000 robo-taxis to be actually operational to be able to make that kind of revenue. And if you take a fairly conservative $100,000 per vehicle, because again, you got to remember, they have LiDAR, they have all sorts of things. And, we're not even really counting the engineering that's going on behind the scenes or the people driving around the city to make sure that the buildings and the sidewalks and all that kind of stuff stays in place and doesn't move around, because remember, these things are riding on rails with LiDAR. Anyway, not taking account of any of that stuff, but just the cost of the vehicles themselves is around $600 million to build 6,000 vehicles. So you're looking at a massive investment to make $1 billion. You're talking about $600 million just to build the cars out. And then you have to try to make money after that. So they're a long ways away from profitability, even if they get to the point where they're making $1 billion in revenue by the end of 2025. All right, so if you're a big Tesla autonomy fan like me, you've probably been, biting your hands listening to all the things that I'm relating about this video. So let's break this down, kind of one step at a time. And then I want to talk about an Elon tweet at the end, which is really, really huge news. So anyway, the first thing is when Jim Farley says that nobody has defined a profitable business model at scale for autonomy, Tesla, right? I mean, Tesla sells full self-driving. They started selling it for around $5,000 a piece. Now it's up to $15,000 a piece. And yeah, the take rate is only supposed to be about 10% of people. And then there's also subscriptions and things like that too. But even at 10%, at $15,000 a pop, that is a lot of money that Tesla's making. So the argument could be made whether or not it's completely profitable or not, but it is making really good money selling autonomy at this point. So, there's people who would say, well, they're not really selling autonomy. What they're doing is they're selling the promise of that. But whatever that is, it's a pretty profitable business for Tesla. They're doing pretty well with that business. Next up is the core business thing, right? We talked about the fact that people want to do autonomy, but they really need to do electrification, or they really need to do other things or something like that. As Elon Musk has said over and over again, autonomy is core to Tesla. They are not going to give up on this. This is not something that's a boondoggle. It's not something that they don't care if it ever works or not. They care a lot. Elon Musk in particular, but Tesla overall cares a ton whether autonomy works. And so they are not giving up on that. They're not throwing it away as soon as it gets difficult. They're not drying up that stuff and cutting all the people in their AI department. It's quite the opposite. In fact, they're hiring more and more people to do this work and spending more money on it the closer that they get. So they're taking the opposite approach. It is a core element of their business. It's not something that they got onto because they had fear of missing out. It's not something that they purchased from other people, although again, they purchased some people, right? They've hired people, things like that. But they've built up pretty much from the ground up. Andre Carpathy has talked about this, how they built up the AI division of Tesla pretty much from scratch after they moved on from Mobileye. So this is something that's absolutely core to Tesla, and it's not something that they're going to just drop because times get hard. So that is a major difference between Tesla and all of these other ventures as well. And then, of course, we have the very famous Mercedes talking about how they've achieved level 3 autonomy, where the car can drive only on the highway, only a certain number of meters behind the car in front of it, only under good conditions, and only like 35 miles an hour, 40 miles an hour. So when's the last time you drove 40 miles an hour on the highway unless you were in a traffic jam? So basically, it's traffic jam level 3 autonomy, which, again, Tesla's already doing that, except for the fact that you literally have to just sit there with your hand on the wheel. The car drives perfectly fine under those types of traffic jam situations. So anyway, Mercedes has this halo thing. They even say that this is not profitable. They're just doing it for the halo effect, for the effect of saying like, we did this first. So, again, for Mercedes, it's not central. It's not core to what they're trying to do. For Tesla, it is. And I'm going to save the Tesla technology as a joke for last, but first I'm going to talk about the fact that Cruise is going to have to spend about $600 million to build out these robotaxis, to build the vehicles themselves, to try to earn $1 billion in revenue. Whereas on the other hand, Tesla sells cars. So their vehicles, they're selling constantly, right? They make a profit, in fact, a very, very good profit on all of their cars, regardless of whether they sell full self-driving. They're all full self-driving capable, which means that as opposed to having to spend $600 million to build 6,000 vehicles, they're actually making a profit when they're building these things. And of course, they have a much, much less expensive sensor suite. It's a sensor suite that costs somewhere around $2,000. I believe Corey Stubin said that when he was talking with Sandy Monroe recently. He said that Tesla's full self-driving package, the whole thing, the hardware, like the board, the cameras, all of that kind of stuff costs around $2,000 per vehicle. And he was saying that's a lot of money when you look at a $25,000 vehicle. $2,000 is quite a bit of money. But anyway, he was saying Tesla is obviously going to continue doing this, and Tesla is able to, recapture that cost by selling the vehicles at a profit, whether or not people use the full self-driving beta. And if they do, then they make a ton of profit. They make, close to $15,000 when people purchase the full self-driving beta. So Tesla is operating in a completely different business model here. Rather than losing money building out the vehicles and then hoping to make it back $15 at a time, for autonomous rides, they're actually selling the cars at a profit. And then if and when autonomy becomes available through Tesla's autopilot, you're looking at a situation where they could potentially make all 365,000 people who currently have full self-driving beta purchased in the United States and Canada could actually start earning money on that and turning those into robo-taxis immediately. And Tesla would capture a piece of that as the kind of owner operator of what's going on. And then, of course, while Cruise and Waymo are really happy that they've gotten 1 million driverless miles, yes, I know this doesn't count exactly because there is a person in the driver's seat, but Tesla's full self-driving beta is capturing, 1 million, 2 million miles per day from the fleet of vehicles that is operating. So you're looking at them capturing this stuff every day the same amount of mileage that these other companies have captured in the entire lifetime of the business. So this is a pretty crazy thing. And yes, I know the person sitting in the driver's seat, but if they're not touching the steering wheel, if they're not driving themselves, if the car is driving, then the car is driving itself. And so you're looking at Tesla making, getting the amount of data and the amount of information and the amount of miles per day that these other companies are getting in their entire lifetimes. All right, and then finally, let's turn back to this graph, which has Tesla in last place at the bottom left of this thing, which means that they're a follower and they haven't executed very well and they have a very, very poor strategy. And I want to then show a tweet from Elon Musk in which he just said, this is just a few hours ago as I record this, we're close to using neural nets all the way from image space to vector space to control. And I said, this is huge news, folks, and it's almost unbelievable that we mere mortals get to test out something that is so advanced it feels like it should be a state secret. Thank you to the entire Tesla AI team. And indeed, thank you so much to the entire AI team at Tesla. You guys are doing amazing work. Okay, so why is Tesla not a joke? Why is this neural network statement by Elon Musk so important? And why is the release of Full Self-Driving 11.3.2 to the wider public in the last 24 hours or so? Why do these factors matter so much? And why do they make me say that Tesla is so radically different that the CNBC video just doesn't even get it? They don't understand. These experts don't understand how far Tesla is in advance. So first of all, and most minimally of all, with Tesla, as always, they don't do PR stuff. So they don't tout the fact that they don't go like, hey, look at us, we're driving millions of riderless miles, except on Investor Day and things like that. So the media, it just doesn't look at them in that way. The other companies are constantly going like, look at us, we did a driverless ride, we did all these things. Tesla could do that. If they were that kind of company, they could easily go out and they could drive 50 miles on the highway without the person touching the wheel, and they could make a big to-do about it, but they don't. So that means that people just generally don't know about Tesla as much, and that's something that's, you could say it's on Tesla, but they just don't care. Okay, so that's the number one, but also the most minimal reason. But the second and most important reason is what Tesla's doing. They don't have LiDAR. They don't have a bunch of crazy sensors and stuff. Tesla's looks like going forward is going to be using a suite of 8 to 11 cameras, depending on what model of vehicle. High definition radar is going to be put into the car. You're going to have hardware 4 eventually. Currently, we have 8 cameras, ultrasonic sensors, and low definition radar. So that's what we've got. So these things are cheap. $2,000 to put the equipment in the car is a whole different ball game than spending $60,000 or $80,000 to equip these other vehicles so that they can do robotaxi stuff. Plus the fact we're looking at something that is able to look around and interpret the world from passive optical information for the most part. In other words, it takes in pixels, it figures out how the world is built, it understands what a car is, what a pedestrian is, what a sidewalk is, what a road lane is, lots and lots of stuff. If you haven't seen my videos, I'll put a link to them. There are tons of videos about why this is also different. But in a nutshell, what Tesla is doing is they're stripping away hard coding, which is a bunch of C code, C++ code, things like that, that just kind of do either or. It's like if then, if then, if then, these kinds of situations do these things. That's very, very brittle. And yes, I mean, what these companies are doing, even with LiDAR and stuff, is really exceptionally difficult. So it's very cool that they've been able to achieve what they have. And I'm not denigrating that. What I'm denigrating is the lack of understanding on people's parts, because Tesla is doing this all with passive optical stuff and eventually with high definition radar, but they are using neural networks for everything. They're stripping out all of this hard coding, and neural networks work fantastically with probabilities. So, as Elon said, neural networks all the way from image space. So again, I've done videos on that. If you haven't seen my vector space thing, right? It's the ability to take pixels in and turn them into like a 3D game or 3D animation, and to know what everything is and where it is and how fast it's moving, all of that stuff. So that's a really important part. So that image space to vector space is a huge thing. But then the last part that they're adding, in addition to, of course, making it work on highways, is it's now moving into the control sequence as well. So that would be the policy network, right? You look around, you see what's going on, and then you have a bunch of if-then statements, like if you see a person walking this close, then brake, all of this kind of stuff. That makes the car drive in a very robotic manner. What you want is a more probabilistic model, and that's what neural networks are fantastic at doing. They're like, 60% odds I should do this and 40% I shouldn't. So it can actually behave in a much more human manner, because human beings, the way that we drive and the way that we interact with the world is much more probabilistic. It's like, is that person going to step out in front of me? I'm giving it like 50% odds right now. And then they take a step and you're like, oh, that's 70% odds. I better start slowing down. So the car can behave in a much more, kind of reasoned manner, and it can do things that are kind of fuzzy. It can operate, the control system can operate in a more fuzzy, more probabilistic manner rather than kind of an on-off manner. So what you should see from this is that the car should drive in a more smooth manner. It should slow down, speed up, make lane changes. All of that kind of stuff should happen in a more smooth, controlled, human-like manner. And so, creating this neural network stuff, the really, really, really hard work was the vision system and understanding the world and turning it into vector space. And that's something that just nobody else has done. And that's why people don't understand how good Tesla is, right? They're not making a big to-do about it, but what they're working on is so radically different than what anybody else is doing. They're all still working on old, just hard-coded stuff, software 1.0 kind of things, as Andre Karpathy would say it. Meanwhile, Tesla is working on software 2.0 and doing the incredibly difficult work of understanding the world. And now they're putting it into their policy network as well. In other words, the thing that actually controls the car. So this car is going to start driving in ways that will fool people. They won't know without looking whether or not you're driving the car or whether the car is driving itself. And that is just radically, radically different. And that's something that obviously the experts just don't understand. And consequently, that means that the experts just don't understand that when this actually arrives, when it achieves it, right? We're looking at this exponential curve, assuming that we don't level off. That is always a danger. That could always happen. But assuming Tesla doesn't level off and they keep going up, we're looking at a moment where they're going to be as good as or better than a human driver. And when that happens, you're looking at millions of cars being able to do this all at once. In other words, if you pay the money just like that, you will be able to have a car that drives you around all over the place if you own a Tesla. This is so different from what anybody else is doing. These other vehicle manufacturers, aside from Mobileye, and I've got to give Mobileye credit, they're creating enabling technology and they're in a lot of different cars, so good for them. But aside from them, pretty much everybody else just has a couple of hundred to a couple of thousand vehicles. They can't compete with this. They can't collect the data. They can't drive the miles. And even if and when they do achieve autonomy, they can't turn it on for hundreds of thousands to millions of vehicles instantly. And so in short, all of this means that far from being a joke and being in last place, Tesla is clearly in first place. They're the stealth version of it, right? They're just waiting to go, aha, suddenly we are better than everybody else. They are currently better than everybody else. It's just nobody is paying attention to them, at least not publicly. I'm sure privately, most of these companies actually do know what a competitor Tesla is, but they're not going to talk about it publicly. Anyway, again, kudos to the Tesla AI team. It's an amazing team. They're doing incredible work. I've got my fingers crossed that I'll get 11.3.2 very, very soon, and I can do a test drive because I really, really want to check it out and see what kind of improvements they've made. But in the meantime, I hope everybody enjoyed this video and found it fun and interesting and thought-provoking and a good argument against the CNBC and mass media type of information that's out there. Anyway, if you did enjoy the video, please do like it so other people can find it, because that would be a good thing. And also consider subscribing for more of this kind of content. As always, of course, a huge shout out to my patrons on Patreon. Thank you all so much for your support. I truly do appreciate it. And of course, if you want to join the team, just check out the link in the description. And if you're interested in a whole bunch of really cool merch, check out our merch store. Link is in the description. We have TeslaBot t-shirts, the Tesla meme t-shirt, success is a possible outcome, 4680 battery cells. All of that stuff is on t-shirts, mugs, tumblers, and on. So check it out. And finally, don't forget, we are both Tesla and Amazon affiliates. If you look in the description, you can see how going shopping for a solar roof, a Powerwall, or anything on Amazon helps out the channel. In the meantime, I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.